Because again, the goal is not to provide credit.
I will enter into your contact, I will defame you. Is that what you want? I will defame you. I will spoil your life, spoil your name, spoil your family's name. Your mother will cry over you. You hear me? They will wish they never gave back to you. You're a stupid bastard. Who the fuck do you think you're fucking with? Are you mad or something?
It was only meant to be a temporary arrangement. One where she gets 70,000 naira to pay her children's school fees. Little did she know that it would turn into an addiction. Months later, she's getting threats, abusive calls, with loved ones keeping their distance as they don't want to get dragged into something they know nothing about. But how did Chioma's life turn upside down, all in the space of 6 months? It all started with a loan app. Chioma is a young widow in her late 30s who sells food items to take care of her 2 children. But even with all her daily struggles, the sales are never enough to solve her financial problems. This was until she was introduced to a certain loan app by her neighbor. Low interest, no paperwork, all completed within minutes. It was as though she was dreaming. Chioma then signed up with this online loan company without hesitation. She imagined she would get loans in small amounts from them anytime she is under pressure, which is practically every time. She would use this money to solve her problems and then pay back in a week or so from her daily sales. The math worked out perfectly in her head. What she failed to factor in though was the ridiculous interest rates and the tendency to get addicted to these loans. Months after consistently taking loans and paying back almost every week, Chioma decided to call it quits. She finally realized that she had been working extra hard but always in debt to this loan company. Her children weren't feeding any better. Her business wasn't expanding. She couldn't point to any positive thing she had gained from taking these loans. 2 weeks after deciding to stop the weekly loan request, she was contacted by an agent from the loan company. They wondered why she wasn't taking loans anymore. The agent offered her a sweet bonus and told her she could upgrade her level with this next loan offer. She would be given twice the usual amount she takes, and this time, instead of just a week to pay back, she was being offered a 30 days period to clear her debt. This money could help her expand her business. She was a bit hesitant, but after much deliberation, she went for it. 200,000 naira to pay 250,000 naira in 30 days. What could go wrong? Well, after clicking on the amount, she was stunned when she got a credit alert of 100,000 naira to pay 250,000 naira, and the money was to be returned in 14 days. This has got to be some mistake. She reached out to the agent, but he wouldn't take her calls. She chatted with the customer support, but they told her to hold on. A few days later, the customer support told her to return the principal as that was the only thing he could do for her. She immediately forwarded the money to the account number provided, and that was when her troubles began. Exactly 1 week after she returned the principal, she started getting calls and text messages threatening to expose her to her in-laws and all her friends if she doesn't pay what she owes. The text messages called her a prostitute who has been sleeping around for money. They told her they would send her pictures alongside her phone number to men, telling them she is a prostitute and available for just a small fee. She cried and pleaded with the agents of this loan app to stop. But her situation only took a sad turn when the agent started forwarding these malicious messages to her contacts and eventually her in-laws. Finding this loan app months ago was like a dream come true to Chioma. She had imagined it would turn her life around, but now it's a nightmare she wishes to wake up from. Just like Chioma, many Nigerians are trapped in the cycle of taking loans from one app to pay back another. Some basically live off loan apps and use their entire income to settle debt only to go back to them again. But taking loans is not the problem. The scam and deceptive practices involved is the real danger. Back in September 2023, the Nigerian government delisted 37 illegal loan apps to protect Nigerians from their activities. This was after persistent harassment of users by the lenders. But even with the intervention of the government in trying to curtail these illegal activities, loan sharks still continue to operate in Nigeria. Well, to understand why, we need to go back to the beginning. How did these loan apps come to be? To help us get to the bottom of this, I teamed up with multiple award-winning investigative journalist David Hundeyin, whose investigative story brought the activities of these loan sharks to limelight.
So the complex mix of circumstances that led to the explosion in the illegal loan space in West Africa is kind of similar to what led to the same thing in Southeast Asia and in South America as well, which is where anywhere there is a large population of relatively poor consumers who are credit hungry, because the engine of the global economy is credit. So consumers generally are credit hungry. But in parts of the world where, first of all, the consumers are poor, and secondly, there isn't enough consumer credit that is readily available. The market is very, very underserved. So in places like Bangladesh, parts of South America like Venezuela, some parts of Colombia, Brazil, Paraguay, and then in West Africa and to an extent East Africa now, is that similar confluence of circumstances. So wherever that happens, these bad actors pop up to fill in the space where the traditional credit industry has sort of left it open for them. So like those are, and then the other key ingredient in this mix is a lack of regulatory presence. So either there's no regulation, or there's little regulation, or the regulation that exists is not enforced. So where all those things come together, then it makes it very easy for these bad actors who predominantly come from China.
If you've ever approached your traditional banks to loan money as an individual, you'll understand why people prefer to use these loan apps instead, no matter how risky it is. In fact, if you are not a rich business person with high value properties, you have higher chances of picking $1 million from the street than getting a loan of 500,000 naira from your local bank.
Traditional banks in Nigeria don't do banking. Traditional banks in Nigeria do cash warehousing, right? If you check where most Nigerian banks make the bulk of their profits from, it's not from lending to the real sector. It's not from lending to Nigerian consumers or the Nigerian real sector. No. If they make any profit from loans, then it's loans to Dangote, those people. You understand? There's a tiny group of fewer than 100 people who actually get loans for business in Nigeria. For the most part, Nigerian banks do not lend money. If you walk into a bank, even though I think at this point most people have an idea of who you are, most people have an idea that, okay, this is how much someone who publishes regularly on YouTube and has so and so number of subscribers will potentially make. So this person should potentially be good for X amount of credit. Walk into a Nigerian bank, I guarantee you will not get a loan. Because they have entirely vacated the consumer space. Nigerian banks are not interested in engaging with consumers except when it comes to warehousing their cash. As a result of their total disinterest in doing banking, that's what has opened the door for these, unethical lenders to come into the space and basically take over the entire consumer finance.
This practice led to the rise of money lenders such as Pay Later, Rent Money, and the likes, which gained popularity by offering quick loans through smartphone apps, often with little to no paperwork. In the early days, there were just a few of these digital money lenders, and people were skeptical of using their services, mainly because it was just too good to be true. But as the years went by, different companies started jumping in on the trend, with new digital lenders popping up at every corner in the country. Little by little, consumer confidence grew. Then COVID-19 happened, and that little spark in the industry became a wildfire. When Rent Money disbursed 1 billion naira in loans in late 2017, it was said that the company had a party to celebrate the breakthrough. Well, fast forward to 2019, 4 billion naira was a normal month for them. The lockdowns that followed the devastation caused by the COVID-19 pandemic meant people were unable to carry out their businesses and so needed a way to survive. These loan companies then began targeting people within the lower income bracket. But with more digital lenders coming into the space, they were now serving the same crop of people because the terms for accessing these loans were somewhat similar. They included a 6-month-long bank statement, verifiable government ID card, employment letter, and work email verification. So, what will be the edge to win this competition in the digital lending space? This question would go on to create a giant hole in the system, and that was when some players started to ease the rules just to get a higher slice of the market. Some digital lenders started giving out loans without the need for an employment letter or work email. Some cut the need for bank statements. Some even started giving out loans to people with bad ratings on credit bureau. The result was a catastrophic default rate. In 2021, Kuda Bank incurred losses of about 6 billion naira due to high non-performing loans. This loss was a 602% rise from the 868 million naira loss it made in 2020. Their default rate was 69% compared to 4.8% of traditional banks. You see, when debtors default, the banks, unlike digital lenders, have a way to cover their losses. Despite these big commercial banks having the financial muscles to make a loss on these loans, considering that they make tens and hundreds of billions of naira in profit, the central bank was still fighting for them. The CBN issued a directive called the Global Standing Instructions (GSI) policy that gave banks the right to deduct the amount owed from the bank account of the loan defaulters in other banks in order to reduce the amount of non-performing loans. A move that reduced the chances of defaulting customers owing money while having money with other banks. Well, digital lenders, on the other hand, don't have the right to debit the accounts of loan defaulters. So while some reputable digital lenders continue to incur losses from these non-performing loans as a result of defaults, the ambitious ones that wanted a higher slice of the market developed a new method of collecting back their money. To make it worse, some of these guys are not even registered with the CBN to begin with. So this gave rise to consumer harassment and intimidation. But how does this play out?
So one thing that these people have had decades of studying the sort of consumer psychology that poor consumers display. One thing they've come to understand about poor people, which is something else that was very similar to what subprime lenders in the US understood about poor people in the lead up to the 2008 financial crisis, is that even though the general perception is that poor people are bad debtors, they don't like to pay their debts, in actual fact, it's actually not the case. In practice, somebody who makes 500,000 naira a month and is owing 150,000 naira or 200,000 naira is actually less likely to make payments on their loan than somebody who makes 50,000 naira a month and is owing 25,000. Even though proportionally the person making 500,000 is paying off way less as a proportion of his income than the person who is making 50,000 naira. But the person who makes 50,000 naira is actually more likely, driven by this sort of very strange feeling of shame and guilt, to actually pay. So that's specifically the markets that they target. If you notice, they're not targeting well-heeled people. They're not offering loans of 10 million, 50 million, 100 million. They can afford to, but they're not offering those loans to the people, because if you're going to offer that kind of loans to the person who can afford to pay it back, right? They know that those people, that's not their market at all. That's not their target. They are looking specifically for that very low income segment, that you are a hairdresser, you make 35,000 naira a month. That's who they are looking for. Because they know that without your 35,000 naira income, you borrow 12,000 naira, which is basically a third of your total disposable income. That's way more than you're supposed to borrow as a proportion of your income. But they know that you would physically starve yourself to ensure that you pay off that loan. And then as soon as you pay it off, you'll be broke, which means that you have to take out another one. So the goal is not to offer consumer credit and fill in a space that has not been served by the commercial banking sector. The goal is like, they act almost like drug dealers, right? A drug dealer, when they're interacting with you, in fact, the very first hit of cocaine or whatever that they give you. They might even give it to you for free. Because the goal is to get you hooked. Because once you're hooked, then you become a source of recurrent revenue. Right? That's how these loan sharks operate.
Imagine you are in a financial fix and you need like 20,000 naira urgently before your salary arrives in 2 weeks' time. You asked all your friends, but everyone has their own problem. So you decided to take a loan against your better judgment. Even though you're ready to take a loan, none of the popular companies were willing to give it to you because they all say you are ineligible for some weird reasons. So you download the app of one of these new companies you saw online. The rate was 15%. It sounds fair. You click and the 20,000 naira is deposited into your account. Now it's time to repay the loan. You now have the money to pay back what you owe plus the interest of 15%. But when you log in, the figure there is different. The app says you are to pay 40% interest rate and no longer 15. How is this possible, you wonder to yourself? Of course, you didn't take screenshots to show that it was 15% initially because you weren't expecting them to do this to you. You feel cheated and disgusted. And so you refuse to pay. Then the calls begin and then the text. Now your contacts are being blackmailed too. This is the playbook of some of these illegal loan apps operating in Nigeria. They target desperate customers, give them enticing rates, and then switch up on them at the last minute.
Now, for a customer that is owing one of these companies and is subjected to the typical harassment mentioned earlier, what can they do?
The truth is, there isn't really much. If it has got to that point already, there's not much you can do. There really isn't much you can do. If they have already started sending out those messages to your contacts and whatnot, yeah, you can go to court and whatnot. But the thing is, like my cousin who took Soko Learning coming to court, the court actually ruled in his favor, in his client's favor, and he actually won his case. And I think the fine was 10 million naira or something. And Soko Learning Company simply rebranded. That's simply what happened. They rebranded, they changed their address, they rebranded. They changed their corporate name, they changed their bank account. So even if you go and get a court order to garnish their accounts, you will not see anything. That's what these companies do. So once that's got to that point, bear in mind these are criminals.
Yeah.
So they don't play by the rules. They have no rules. So if it has gotten to that point already, then you should pretty much just grit your teeth and accept that okay, you have to write this out till it's done. So probably what I would advise you to do is go and change your number.
Talking about the harassment, how do they manage to get away with cyberbullying and harassment of people, despite the fact that they say we have a certain cyberbullying law in Nigeria, or that only applies to journalists, I guess?
So again, two things. First of all, from the regulatory side of things, the regulation actually exists in Nigeria. So we have something called an NDPR, which is basically a Nigerian ripoff of the European GDPR. Right? It exists on paper. On paper, there's a Nigerian Data Protection Agency. There's an FCCPC. On paper, all these institutions and laws exist. The problem is always, as usual, the political will, the regulatory will. Do they actually want to do their job, especially when these people come and give them money? Because that's the reality of how these things work in Nigeria. Nigeria is a place where if I decide that I want to open a business and what my business does is that it slaughters children and boils their hearts, that might sound completely absurd to you. But the truth is, if I had enough money, there are places in Nigeria where I could make it work if I had enough money. Because Nigerian regulators, that's just how they are. Like, Nigerian regulators do not fundamentally see their job as working for Nigerians, protecting the interests of Nigerian people. Nigerian regulators see their office as as a cash cow, an opportunity to extract wealth.
Considering the amount of data collected by these loan apps, I'm sure you know a lot about these data brokers. Would you say these loan apps are involved in data brokerage?
Well, it's not me that's saying it, because this is actually a very well-known thing. I believe it was Soko Learning Company, when they were initially they were investigated by the Nigerian Data Protection Agency. This was back in I think 2021. Sorry, they weren't investigated by the agency. They were taken to court
Okay.
by my cousin, who happens to be a lawyer, Ceci Hundeyin. He was acting on behalf of a client of his who suffered that defamation. And we were taken to court, and it was established in court that these people misuse data in all sorts of ways. They share data with third parties without the permission or the knowledge of the people whose data they're sharing. Who knows where else data has ended? And by the way, this data is not just your bio data, it's not just your name, your age. No. It's also very, very, very private stuff that nobody's supposed to know, like your BVN. You understand? Like somebody who has your BVN can do a lot of damage with that information. And if you read the story that I published back in 2022, you'll see that the whistleblowers that I spoke to gave me access to backend information where I was the one, when I was publishing the story, I was the one who had to redact certain data fields. Because when I was drafting the story, I could see the BVN. Complete strangers, I've never met these people before. I could see their full data. So if I were to take that data, go to someone on the dark web and sell it, who knows what could be done with that data? This is data that can be used to essentially create a whole identity. Right?
Yeah.
It can be used to basically create a digital clone of you. Like in theory, that data, the only thing that is missing is biometric data. Everything else is there. So in theory, if I gather a dump, a sufficient number of these data sets, in theory, I could create an army of, I don't know, fake voters. I could register SIM cards to people who don't know that the SIM cards are apparently registered to them. So let's say tomorrow you get a call or you get a knock on your door and it's the police who have come to arrest you, and they say that your phone number was used in a kidnapping transaction. And you say, what kind of nonsense is that? This is my phone, check my record. But they say, no, you have another number that is registered to you. Are you not so and so and so? Are these not your details? Blah, 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 blah. Somebody has probably gone and registered used your details, which they got from God knows where, to register. These are the dangers. And these companies absolutely 100% do trade people's data that way.
When you were talking, I just remembered another of your story I read as regards Wema Bank. They could use your data to open accounts with different banks as well.
Exactly.
Since they have access to your BVN.
Exactly. Which will put you in serious trouble for all kinds of money laundering offenses, including terror financing.
Well, already, like you mentioned earlier, there's a central bank regulation against issuance of consumer credit by any unlicensed entity. So, what more can the central bank do to curtail the activities of these loan sharks?
I mean, to be honest, the central bank has done everything that it should do. It has put out notices several times stating very clearly that any entity that doesn't either operate, use in partnership with a licensed CBN microfinance bank or deposit money bank or whatever, or doesn't have a banking license of its own, is essentially an illegal operation. It has done this several times. The CBN doesn't have an enforcement arm. So it's not as if the CBN doesn't have armed people that go around shutting down. At the end of the day, it's the job of the police. It's the job of the different agencies involved who coordinate with the police. It's their job to do that. So if these guys are not doing their job, to be honest, I'm not really sure there's anything the CBN can do about that.
But is there a way to avoid falling victim to these illegal loan apps? Financial crises sometimes come at you without warning. So how can one know which loan company is trustworthy?
Well, the number one thing does this lender operate with a CBN license? Are they in partnership with a CBN licensed organization? And if so, which organization is it? Because it's one thing, some of them come out and just say licensed by CBN. Right, but you can just say that licensed by CBN in partnership with, like, where is your license? What license is it? You understand? Like, That is information that should be in the public domain. It shouldn't be hidden. Right?
Okay.
So first of all, is it licensed by the CBN? If it's not licensed by the CBN, you can already chalk it off. This is a loan shark. This is an illegal operation. Leave it. Leave it. No matter how tempting it is, that I just need this 15,000 now, and I can't see any other way I'll get it. And even though they say I'll pay back 25,000 in 7 days, I'm getting paid at the end of the week, so I'll definitely have that money. No matter how tempting it is, once you start like a drug, you will not stop. That 15,000 you borrowed, before you know it, you'll be owing 450,000 and a plot of land in Lekki, and you will not understand how. That's how these people operate. So that's the number one thing. Is it licensed by the CBN? If not, run away. Number two, where did you come across it? Is it some random Google Play Store thing? Like, it's just like a random app. There are grammatical errors on the thing. There are spelling errors. You can tell that the person who designed this thing doesn't speak English. Something like that. That's another red flag. Number three red flag, and the most obvious red flag. This is the global way for recognizing what is or is not a loan shark. What is the interest rate? What's the interest rate? Very simple. Never calculate the interest based on the term that they gave you, whether it's 6 days, 7 days. Always analyze it. That's calculated across 365 days.
Okay.
Right. So generally speaking, anything with an interest rate above, I think, is 29.9%. So let's say 30%. Generally speaking, it's thought that anything above 30% interest annually is either it's a loan shark or it's some kind of illegal activity. And the simple reason for that is it's a very well-known thing financially that there is almost no legal activity on the planet that can realistically and as a matter of that can realistically and sustainably offer 30% profit annually. There is no legal activity that does that. Keyword legal. So anything that is either promising returns of more than 30% or that is demanding interest of more than 30% can only be linked to something illegal. That's the basic rule of thumb.
To avoid falling victim to illegal loan apps or loan scams or these loan sharks company, whatever they are called now, always take your time to research lenders thoroughly and find out if the company offering you this loan is legitimate. Never pay any money upfront to anybody promising you loans, and beware of how lenders reach out to you with offers. If it's too good to be true, it most definitely is. Thanks for watching. Check out this video showing up on your screen right now, and I'll see you inside.